Hello. So I had this issue on my stream where the microphone that I'm using stands a little too low when I simply put it on the table. I used to use a stack of books to boost its height, but I finally decided to create a makeshift stand for it, as well as a pop filter from literal garbage. So for the stand, I'm using a cookie box. Any box of adequate size would do, a bunch of old books, and some styrofoam that something had been packaged in. I'm cutting the foam to shape using a paper knife and filling in any gaps between the books and the box. If you don't have any books to spare for this, magazines would also work really well, and you could also just use cardboard. So now I'm using self-adhesive wallpaper to cover the entire thing to make it look a bit more presentable. Put the box on the wallpaper, mark where the corners of the box are, and then you can just keep the box on the wallpaper to guide you. Cut a single line from the edge of the paper to the mark that you've made. Turn clockwise and cut another line. Repeat until you have 4 cuts. Then remove the protective layer and attach the wallpaper to the box. I ripped mine a little bit when removing the protective layer. You can see the rip here, but it still worked fine. It's pretty forgiving. Once you raise the wallpaper over the box, you'll need to make more cuts in order to attach it to the top and the sides. Ideally, you need a piece of wallpaper that's large enough to cover the box entirely, but if you don't have enough, you can just cover the open part to hold the books in. If the piece of your wallpaper is too large, you can cut off any excess parts or just overlap them if you want. The wallpaper I'm using is leftover from another project. If you don't have that, you could use regular wallpaper, an old paper bag, or cardboard and just use glue or adhesive tape to secure them to the box. You could also just use one single piece of cardboard to cover the top of the box so that the books don't fall out and be done with it. So now this next part is entirely optional. I'm using a thin piece of styrofoam that is actually a broken ceiling panel and cutting it to shape to fit the box. Now, I'm going to jam the legs of the microphone into the styrofoam and then use the indentations to cut holes in the styrofoam. This will help the microphone to stay in place on the stand. Now, I'm attaching the styrofoam layer to some wallpaper and cutting holes through the wallpaper as well. And now I'm attaching the wallpaper with the foam layer to the box. If you want it to be a bit more secure, you can use some double-sided adhesive tape between the box and the styrofoam. Now onto the pop filter. This is an embroidery hoop. If you don't already have one, ask around. Someone you know might have one that they're not using anymore. You could also find them at thrift stores, and even new, they're quite cheap and fairly easy to find. So now I'm jamming a leg of some pantyhose into the hoop. This part is a bit tricky. It's easier to do it if you have someone to help you, but even if you don't, it's possible to do it alone. It just might take a few tries. Tighten the hoop as much as you can, and then cut away any excess pantyhose. I'm going to use manicure scissors to remove the last little bits of the extraneous pantyhose. Now, to create the leg for the pop filter, I'm using some old wires. This wire is quite thick and will hold shape, but it will also allow me to reposition the pop filter if I need to. Bend the wire in half and put one of the legs between the inner part of the hoop and the tightening wheel. Loop the wire around the tightening wheel at least once. The danger here is that you might accidentally loosen the wheel, so be aware of that. Then twist the halves of the wire together to form a single leg. Now this next part is optional. I'm running some duct tape around the rim of the embroidery hoop to make it black. You could also paint it if you don't like its original color, but I was afraid that the paint wouldn't really stick to the plastic very well, or at least I don't have the kind of paint that would, so I went with duct tape. Now, Since I'm going to be using this filter with my box stand, I've decided to reinforce the leg with a chopstick. If you have a clamp on hand, you could also simply clamp the hook to a chopstick or some other stick, but using the wire will allow me to adjust the positioning of the pop filter in a way that having a rigid leg that's clamped onto the hook wouldn't. I'm going to wrap the whole thing in duct tape to make it a bit stronger. It's not particularly good looking. I could make the leg look visually more pleasing, but this part won't really be visible, so I don't really care if it doesn't look that great. But if you want to make it look a bit better, you can just keep the wires straight when you attach them to the stick. Now, in order for my stand to hold the pop filter, I'm going to have to make a hole in it. I'm marking where I want the filter to go, and now I'm going to make the hole using an awl and a manual drill. If you have a power drill, it'll be a lot easier, but I just wanted to demonstrate that it's possible to do it without power tools. The hole is a bit ugly. I'm going to cut a small piece of wallpaper, cut an X shape in the middle of it with manicure scissors, and adhere that over the hole. This way, I'll be able to insert the pop filter into the hole through the covering, but the hole itself will be practically invisible. So this is the final version. I've actually been using it for quite a while on my stream already, and it does the job, and I can easily take it apart and put it away when I need to. The only issue I'd flag is that since it stands between me and the keyboard, it can be a bit in the way. It doesn't get in the way of gaming much, but if I have to look at my keyboard or type, it certainly is in the way. Also, in case you already have a commercially made pop filter, you can make a hole in the side of the box and insert the leg of the filter into that hole. And that way your box stand can hold a commercial pop filter as well. But keep in mind that this will make it even more in the way if you put it between yourself and your keyboard. So that's it. I hope that was helpful. Thank you for watching. Bye.